The ACT has become the first Australian jurisdiction to legalise the personal use and cultivation of cannabis. But police would still be able to charge someone with cannabis possession under federal law. So there's a bit of a grey area there. Joining me now is the ACT's Shadow Attorney General, Jeremy Hanson. Jeremy Hanson, thanks very much for joining us this morning. Good to be with you. First of all, why legalise cannabis?
Well, we shouldn't be is the answer to that. I think it's sending the wrong message. It's condoning the use of cannabis, and as the AMA will tell you, it can cause a fivefold risk in the incidence of psychosis. It's creating confusion around the conflict between Commonwealth law and ACT law. Of course, the problems with drug driving remain. So it's been a pretty poor exercise. It's bad legislation. There's still confusion out there. I think all it's going to do is cause problems for our police force out there who are trying to actually manage the balance between ACT laws and Commonwealth laws. It's going to cause more people to drug drive. And what we're going to see, as we've seen in other jurisdictions that have gone down this path overseas, you get to see more hospital presentations from mental illness and other concerns that arise with cannabis use.
So what are your concerns when it comes to how the local law and the Commonwealth law will, and the concerns about how they will work side by side?
Well, what happens now is that the ACT's brought in these laws. It's a sort of quasi-legalisation to try and work around the fact that Commonwealth law still applies and cannabis is still illegal under Commonwealth law. Now, with the Australian Federal Police contracted essentially to provide police services here in the ACT, it is open to ACT police officers to charge people under Commonwealth law. So previously to yesterday, we had a pretty good regime here, and if you were caught with small amounts of cannabis for personal use, you essentially got was like a speeding ticket, a simple cannabis offence notice, a SCON. Whereas now you might actually find yourself in the criminal justice system charged under Commonwealth law. It's still ambiguous in terms of what our police officers are actually going to do on the street, and it makes it very difficult for them because they can't just walk past people conducting illegal activity. They can't just brush that aside. So this may be tested in a higher court. It may end up with somebody being convicted or charged with an offence and ending up with much more severe penalties than they would have until cannabis was this quasi-legalisation yesterday.
So is the expectation that the government then would step in?
Look, we'd have to see how it plays out, and this would need to be tested in the courts. The ACT government can't really get too involved when it comes to a court case, but we're going to have to wait to see whether the federal government wants to test this in the courts. I don't think that they will. The greater concern is an individual out there thinking that they're doing the right thing, thinking that they're doing something legal and finding themselves being charged with a Commonwealth offence.
What is illegal under ACT law?
Well, what happens now is that if you have a small amount that you're growing at home, you can grow up to 2 plants as an individual, up to 4 plants per household, and you can have 50 grams. But anything outside of that remains illegal, including supply. So if you've grown a plant at home and you give some to your neighbours, that would constitute supply. Potentially sharing a joint with somebody, if you've grown it and share that joint, that constitutes supply. So there's a lot of grey areas in this laws. The reality is we had a pretty good regime up until yesterday. It's not like people were being thrown in jail for cannabis use holus bolus. Police weren't knocking down people's doors. I still think that we should have a deterrent. We shouldn't be sending a message that cannabis is legal and is safe. Any government that's condoning cannabis use, in my view, is doing so recklessly because it still has that effect on psychosis. We know, particularly for young people, it can wreck lives.
But it is passed, right? So is there any other option for you to step in to stop it? I mean, would you be pressuring the federal government to get involved?
No, it has passed. The reality is that we've got a Greens party here and a Labor Party in coalition. They've scrambled, and there's a fight between the Labor Party and the Greens to be the first to bring this legislation in, and I think that rush is why we've got such bad legislation. It hasn't been properly thought through. The reality is we've now got that legislation. We will continue to make the point that cannabis can be a very high risk, particularly to younger people. But I think what we're seeing here is the first step, and it's very clear from the messages being put out by some of the Greens members and some of the Labor members, this is a first step. They want to go further, potentially with cannabis and potentially with other drugs as well.
What are people who want to grow, their own marijuana. How do they get the seeds? Because as I understand it, that's illegal. So wouldn't that stand to reason that there would be a rush on the black market to get the seeds to grow?
Yeah, well, absolutely. The supply of seeds, possessing seeds, that all remains illegal. So how do you do this in the first place? So in order to get plants, you must have done something illegal to get those plants growing in the first place. And that's one of the flaws in this legislation, that you've essentially got to do something illegal in order to grow those plants. You also have a situation, you can grow 4 plants in a house. So, you know, if someone wanted to, they can grow 4 plants in a house. These plants can get very large. There's nothing the police can do about that. And then potentially that can just be harvested and taken down to a market down in Sydney to sell. And it makes it very difficult for ACT policing and for New South Wales policing to do anything about that.